cornea. Is my slide visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So today we'll be talking about the cornea, briefly about the anatomy and physiology, and about a few words about bacterial and fungal corneal ulcer. Okay, so these are your learning objectives for today's session. So at the end of the session, you should be able to describe briefly the different layers of the cornea, state the different factors which are responsible for maintaining the corneal transparency, and then define, classify, and enumerate risk factors for corneal ulcer. Okay, so you should be able to define corneal ulcer, classify corneal ulcer, and enumerate the risk factors for it. And finally, differentiate between bacterial and fungal corneal ulcer and know about their management. Okay, so these are your learning objectives for today's session. So coming to the cornea, briefly about the anatomy. So as you all have all gone through this cornea in your previous classes during your anatomy and physiology classes. So as we all know, cornea is a highly tissue specialized to refract and transmit light. Okay, so it is one of the main structures which is responsible for refraction and transmission of light. So thereby we see clearly. Okay, so it is one of the main structures which is responsible for good vision or for normal vision. So anything in the cornea, any opacity, any lesion also will hamper the good vision and will lead to visual impairment. Okay, so you'll have to remember about that. And thickness of the cornea is around 1 millimeter in the periphery, and it is less, around 0.5 mm at the central portion. Okay, so this is important because central corneal ulcers are more likely to perforate than the peripheral corneal ulcers. Okay, so because of this thickness, then it is an avascular structure, as we all know, and it has mainly the 5 layers. Okay, so the different layers of the cornea, starting from the outermost to innermost, are the epithelium, then the Bowman's layer, then the stroma, Descemet's membrane, and the endothelium. There's another layer which has just been recently found out. Okay, it is between the Descemet's membrane and the endothelium, and that is known as the Duas layer. Okay, D-U-A-S, Duas layer. So that's another layer there. But basically, these are the different layers of the cornea, starting from the outside inwards. So the epithelium, the Bowman's membrane, the stroma, the Descemet's membrane, and endothelium. Now coming to the individual layers, so epithelium layer, it is comprises of stratified squamous epithelium, and it comprises around 5 to 10% of the total corneal thickness. And the Bowman's membrane, it is an ocellular mass of condensed fibrils, and once damaged, it doesn't regenerate and leaves a superficial scar. Okay, so mainly you have to remember about the Bowman's membrane is that it is a layer where once it is damaged, it doesn't regenerate and it leaves a superficial scar. The stroma, are also known as substantia propria, it comprises around 90% of the total corneal thickness. Okay, and main substances or main things which are present in the stroma is the keratocytes, which produces the ground substance and collagen fibrils, and it is also responsible for the lattice arrangement of the collagen fibrils. Okay, so you'll have to remember that it comprises around 90%. So maximum of the cornea, more than 90%, around that much is occupied by the stroma, and it comprises of the keratocytes, and the lattice arrangement of collagen fibers are present in the stroma. And the innermost, then the Descemet's membrane, which is the basement membrane of the corneal endothelium. Okay, and then innermost layer is the endothelium, which comprises of a single layer of hexagonal cells, and the normal endothelial cell density is around 2000 to 3000 cells per square millimeter. Okay, so it's important to know about the normal endothelial cell density because it can get damaged, especially during intraocular surgeries. And the highest density of these endothelium is at the periphery. Okay, so those are the 5 different layers, starting from the epithelium, Bowman's membrane, the stroma, the Descemet's membrane, and then the endothelium. Coming to the nerve supply of the this cornea, it is supplied by the long and short ciliary nerves, which are branches of the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, so mainly by the trigeminal nerve, by the ophthalmic division. And you'll have to remember that there's a pericorneal plexus, which is outside the limbus, just outside the limbus. And from this plexus, it passes, the nerves pass onto the cornea as 60 to 70 trunks, and they lose their myelin sheath and reach the cornea. So because of this very rich nerve supply, because of this pericorneal nerve plexus, the cornea is supplied, it's very richly supplied. So whenever these nerve endings are disturbed, as in case of corneal ulcer and all, there will be presence of pain in the patient's eye. Okay, so it has a rich nerve supply by means of the ophthalmic division of trigeminal nerve, and you'll have to know about the pericorneal plexus. And blood supply, as we all know, the cornea is a vascular structure. It doesn't have its own blood supply, and mainly the blood supply comes from the anterior conjunctival branches of the anterior ciliary artery. Okay, and that is mainly supplies the peripheral part of the cornea or the limbus. So the corneoscleral limbus, it is supplied by the anterior conjunctival branches of anterior ciliary artery. Okay, so that's about the nerve supply and the blood supply. So here you can see the different layers of the cornea as the epithelium, then the Bowman's layer here, and then you can see the stroma, which comprises almost around 90%, then the Descemet's membrane here, and then the single layer of hexagonal cells, which is the endothelium. Okay, so here you can see that the stroma comprises of 90%, and these are the regular arrangement of the collagen fibrils. Okay, and this is basically a slit lamp view. When we look at the slit lamp on the biomicroscope, you see these structures. So the outside is epithelium, and the innermost is the endothelium. So now there are various factors which are responsible for maintaining the corneal transparency. Okay, so as we all know, when you look at the cornea, when you observe a patient's cornea, or for that matter, anyone's cornea, you know that it is nice and transparent. Okay, it has to be shiny, it has to be moist, it has to be transparent. Okay, so these are the basic things that you look for when you're looking at a cornea, the normal thing. So it has to be transparent. That's very important for transmitting the light and for proper refraction. Okay, so there are various factors which are responsible for maintaining the corneal transparency. The first is the anatomical factors. So mainly these are vascularity, doesn't have any blood vessels. The second responsibility factor is the demyelinated nerve fibers. So once they enter the cornea, the nerve becomes demyelinated. So because of this also contribute to the transparency. Then the lattice or the regular arrangement of collagen fibers in the stroma, as I just showed you all in the previous slide. So here you can see it is regular arrangement or the uniform arrangement of the fibrils in the collagen fibers in the stroma, and also regular arrangement of epithelial and endothelial cells. Okay, so anatomical factors are these. So because of avascularity, because of demyelinated nerve fibers, because of lattice arrangement of collagen fibrils, and because of the regular arrangement of epithelial and endothelial cells. And the second one is the relative dehydration of corneal stroma. So it basically stays in the state of relative dehydration, and that is mainly because of the endothelium sodium potassium ATPase pump. Okay, so that is also contributes to the corneal transparency. Okay, so these are the main factors, the anatomical factors, and then because of the relative dehydration. Okay, so if there's any problem in any of these factors, okay, then that will lead to loss of the corneal transparency. Okay, so that's briefly about the anatomy of the cornea, the various layers, the blood and nerve supply, and then the factors which are responsible for maintaining the corneal transparency. Okay. So now coming to the main topic, the next one, it is corneal ulcer, or also known as keratitis. Okay, so corneal ulcer or keratitis, it is defined as the break in the continuity of the epithelium with superadded infection. So you all have to remember that whenever there's keratitis, it takes place, or corneal ulcer to take place, there has to be a break or a breach in the continuity of the epithelium. Along with that, there has to be superadded infection. Okay, so if it's just a simple break or a breach in the continuity of the epithelium, that is a simple corneal abrasion. Okay, so if it's just a break, that is an abrasion, corneal abrasion. However, for a corneal ulcer or keratitis to take place, then there has to be presence of superadded infection. And keratitis or corneal ulcer is a very important cause of blindness and visual loss globally. In the context of Nepal also, according to the National Blindness Survey, corneal ulcer and its sequelae are one of the important causes of blindness, second or third on the list. Okay, so keratitis. So there are certain, coming to the classification of this corneal ulcer, we have the etiological and the clinical or morphological classification. So etiological, the infective one, which is important for you all. So the bacterial, viral, fungal, that's important. Allergic corneal ulcer, trophic keratitis, keratitis associated with skin diseases or associated with collagen vascular disorders, traumatic, okay, sometimes they can be traumatic, one of the main important causes in our setup, and the other one is idiopathic. Okay, so this is the etiological classification of corneal ulcer or keratitis. So infective, allergic, trophic, keratitis associated with skin diseases or with collagen vascular disorders, and traumatic or idiopathic keratitis. The another one is the morphological classification, or according to the clinical classification. So one is the ulcerative one and the other is the non-ulcerative type of keratitis. So ulcerative, you have to depend on the, it is classified further into the location, whether it is the central one or peripheral one. So as I said earlier, the central corneal ulcers are more likely to perforate than the peripheral ones. Then associated hypopine, whether there is presence of hypopine. So the hypopine is basically a pus in the anterior chamber. So simple corneal ulcer where there's no pus in the anterior chamber or hypopine, and another one is hypopine corneal ulcer, or the depth, whether it is superficial or is deep, or a corneal ulcer with impending perforation or a perforated corneal ulcer. Okay, so all these are the ulcerative types of corneal ulcer. And the non-ulcerative types are superficial and deep. So superficial, you can have diffuse, punctate keratitis or superficial keratitis. And deep one is the interstitial or the deciform. Okay, so this is the classification, the etiological classification and the morphological or the clinical classification. So for y'all, you'll have to know more about the ulcerative type. So the location is important, whether it's central or peripheral, whether it is a simple corneal ulcer, it has associated hypopine, and then the depth also is important. Superficial ones heal more faster, and deep ones take more time. And if it's corneal also with impending perforation, we'll need the management will change, and so for perforated corneal ulcer. Now coming to the risk factors, so there are a lot of risk factors or the predisposing factors which cause a corneal ulcer. Okay, and it can mainly be divided into the ocular type or the systemic factors. So ocular risk factors are anything in and around the eyes. So starting with the eyelids, so blepharitis, when there's inflammation of the eyelashes there, dry eye syndrome, okay, when there's not enough tears, either it's normal production is there or output is deranged. So because of dry eyes, that will lead ectropion, entropion. Okay, so ectropion is outward turning of the lid margin, entropion is inward turning of the lid margin. Lagophthalmos, when the eyelids don't close properly. Okay, so because of that. Then chronic dacryocystitis, where there is inflammation of the lacrimal sac. Contact lens wearers, very important cause, especially in the Western world. And trauma and foreign body, very important in our setup. Okay, so this should have been right there, number 1 on the list. Okay, trauma and foreign body, especially in a setup. Agricultural trauma, foreign body, trauma with vegetative matter, all that is important. Prior corneal surgery. Okay, so sometimes some patients may have had undergone corneal surgery, like refractive surgery, okay, like classic and all, which is very common nowadays, or sometimes even corneal transplantation. And also prior corneal surgery is an important risk factor for developing keratitis. And another very important in our part of the world, in our setup, is administration of ocular medication, especially for steroids. So people have the habit of going to the pharmacy and getting steroids for anything, okay, for any kind of red eyes. So use of that will lead to, it's an important risk factor for developing corneal ulcer, especially the fungal ones. Okay, so these are the ocular risk factors. So all these are important risk factors which will lead to corneal ulcer. And the other one is the systemic risk factors. So any patients with diabetes, long standing, which is not uncontrolled, and in immunocompromised patients with debilitating conditions and malnutrition conditions or malnourished patients, all these are also risk factors which contribute to the forming or developing of corneal ulcer, be it bacterial, viral, or fungal. Okay, so you'll have to know about the risk factors or the predisposing conditions which are important for developing corneal ulcer. Okay, so these you'll have to remember about the risk factors. Now coming to the bacterial corneal ulcer, first I'll deal with bacterial, then we'll deal with the fungal corneal ulcer. So the most causative organisms in case causing the bacterial corneal ulcer in gram-positive is Staphylococcus, and in gram-negative organisms are Klebsiella and E. coli. And others are usually, especially in case of contact lens wearers, is the Pseudomonas species. Okay, so these are some of the causative organisms. And there's certain things of certain organisms which can invade an intact cornea. Okay, so since we've learned in the definition that there has to be a break in the continuity of the epithelium for a corneal ulcer to develop along with superadded infection. However, you have to keep in mind that there are certain organisms which can invade an intact cornea. Even though there's no break or breach in the epithelium, certain organisms can invade an intact cornea and cause keratitis. So these are Neisseria, Cornybacterium, Haemophilus, and Listeria. Okay, so these are the organisms which can invade an intact cornea and cause corneal ulcer or keratitis. Okay, so these are important. You'll have to remember there are certain organisms which can invade an intact cornea. Now coming to the clinical findings, so the main symptoms with which the patient will come is the decreased visual acuity. So decrease in the vision, the deblurring of vision along with painful red eye. Okay, so the patient will have red eye, it is painful, it is cause a decrease in the visual acuity, there's photophobia, and there's lacrimation and discharge as well. Okay, so these are the symptoms usually seen in all types of keratitis, be it bacterial, viral, or fungal. So when you look at the signs or when you examine the patients, so the clinical signs which we look for are, there'll be lid edema. Okay, so as you can see in this picture, some amount of lid edema is there. Then in the conjunctiva, you can see the diffuse congestion. Okay, so here you can see the diffuse congestion all over the bulbar conjunctiva. And the another one is circumcorneal congestion. Okay, so circumcorneal congestion is the congestion all around the limbus. Okay, so 360° around the limbus. And then you have to talk about the corneal lesion or the ulcer. Okay, so the corneal lesion or the ulcer, whenever you are describing the lesion, you have to describe about the size, okay, roughly about the size of the ulcer, the location, okay, central or periphery, whether it is at the center or the periphery. Then we have margins, whether it is well defined. or there's a not well defined. Then the corneal epithelium, about the corneal epithelium, whether it is intact, okay, and absence of the corneal epithelium can be done with the help of fluorescein staining. So whenever you stain the corneal and the epithelium, there is a breach in the corneal epithelium, then it will take up fluorescein staining. Okay, I'll show that in the later slides. And then another important thing is the anterior chamber reaction and hypopine. Okay, so we talked about the circumcorneal congestion, which is 360-degree congestion all around the limbus. So size of the ulcer, okay, so location. So this is a central corneal ulcer because it is right at the center of the cornea and it is quite well defined. Okay, there's no feathery margins. Then corneal epithelium looks intact, and then there's presence of a hypopine in this case. Okay, and then mainly to see the corneal epithelium, whether it is intact or absent, you do the fluorescein staining. Okay, so this is a slit lamp view of a bacterial corneal ulcer. So corneal circumcorneal congestion, some amount of chemosis can be seen. Okay, and there's a huge corneal ulcer right in the center of the cornea, and then you can see the hypopine here. Okay, so same here, this is a huge corneal ulcer right in the center, almost likely to perforate. Okay, so here you can see the corneal epithelium with corneal ulcer with epithelium defect. So when you stain the cornea with fluorescein dye with the help of fluorescent paper, okay, fluorescent paper, then you, whenever it takes up staining like this, you see it under the slit lamp under the cobalt blue light. It takes up the yellowish or greenish yellow tinge. Okay, so there's a corneal ulcer with epithelial defect. Same here also in this slide. Okay, so there's conjunctiva diffuse congestion, some amount of circumcongestion as well. Okay, circumciliary congestion, and then there's a corneal epithelium defect, which you can see with the help of a fluorescein dye. Okay. So now coming to the stages of corneal ulcer, there are 4 stages. So first is the stage of infiltration. So whenever there is break in epithelium, there will be invasion by the organisms, and that will lead to adherence to the epithelium and underlying stroma. Okay, but however, you'll have to remember that there are certain organisms which can invade an intact epithelium. Okay, so first is stage of infiltration. Next is stage of progression. Okay, so the next stage is stage of progression, where the adherence of the organisms takes place. That will lead to diffusion of toxins and enzymes, and that will lead to resultant tissue destruction. Okay, so second is stage of progression. First is stage of infiltration. The third stage is the stage of regression. So provided the patient has had medication, is under treatment, so after the treatment is started, then there'll be an improvement in symptoms and signs. There'll be decreased infiltrates, or the ulcer will become decreased in size. The ulcer becomes demarcated. There's decreased anterior chamber reaction, and epithelium healing begins. Okay, so all these shows that it is a stage of regression. When the patient has started medication, there's improve in the symptoms and signs. There's also becomes demarcated, decrease in anterior chamber reaction, and epithelium healing begins. And stage 4 is the stage of healing, where there's further improvement in the symptoms and signs. There's increased visual acuity. And if it is healing, the necrotic stroma will turn into a scar tissue and vascularization will take place. Okay, so whenever there's vascularization in the cornea, in the corneal ulcer, it means that it is a stage of healing. Okay, so these are the 4 stages of corneal ulcer: stage of infiltration, of progression, stage of regression, and stage of healing. Now coming to the management of bacterial corneal ulcers, so management is always the investigation and the treatment. So the investigation which we do in cases of corneal ulcer is corneal scraping. Okay, so the most important investigation, or the only investigation which has to be done, is the corneal scraping, which is done by help of Kimura's spatula, where you scrape from the base and margin of the ulcer. Okay, you go for staining, Gram and Giemsa staining, and send it for culture sensitivity in the various culture or various media. So if it's aerobic, for gram positive and gram negative bacteria, you go for blood agar and chocolate agar. For anaerobic bacteria, you go for thioglycate blood. And if it's fungal, you go for SDA and BHI. So ideally, you should go for all these and look for the organism which is grown. Okay, so the most important investigation which is done in cases of corneal ulcer is the corneal scraping with the help of Kimura's spatula. And another important investigation which has to be done is lacrimal syringing. Okay, this is usually done to see for any blockage in the lacrimal drainage system, which might lead to chronic dacrocystitis, and which is one of the risk factors for corneal ulcer. Okay, so investigation is corneal scraping, most important, and also lacrimal syringing. The treatment of bacterial corneal ulcer, so you have the medical treatment and the surgical treatment. So medical treatment, you all can remember it as 5 A's. So 5 A's, the first A is antibiotics. So broad spectrum antibiotics, usually we go for the fortified cefazolin and fortified gentamicin. Okay, so these are made from the IV solutions, and then you have cefazolin in the dose of 50 milligram per ml and gentamicin from 14 milligram per ml. So the frequency depends upon the severity. If it's very severe, like the one I showed you, where it's a huge corneal ulcer, it can be as frequent as 1 hourly, otherwise 4 hourly or 6 hourly will suffice. And then atropine 1% 3 times a day. This is important to decrease the ciliary spasm, which causes the pain in corneal ulcer. So it decreases the ciliary spasm, and it prevents the formation of posterior syndicate. So that's why atropine is given. Analgesic, okay, usually again to decrease the pain, and acetazolamide 250 mg QID is given to decrease the intraocular pressure. So usually in case of keratitis, the IOP may increase. So because of that, acetazolamide is given in a dose of 250 milligram 4 times daily. And lastly, vitamin A. So vitamin A is very important because it helps in healing of the ulcer. It helps in proper epithelialization. So that's why vitamin A is given in all cases of corneal ulcer. Okay, so in bacterial, you'll have to remember the 5 A's, the antibiotics, the broad spectrum ones, atropine 1%, analgesic, acetazolamide, and vitamin A. Okay, so these are the treatment. However, in spite of all these medical therapy, the patient is not, the corneal ulcer is not healing, or the patient is not responding to treatment, then you'll have to find out the other causative agents. Okay, look for other risk factors, and then surgical treatment is done. So one is the Gunderson's flap, which is not done nowadays that much. That is basically you are cutting the conjunctiva and bringing a flap of the conjunctiva over the ulcer, so that helps in better healing, as the conjunctiva is richly vascularized. Okay, so the piece of bulbar conjunctiva or a hood of the bulbar conjunctiva is brought over the corneal ulcer for proper healing. And the last option is the therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty, which is nothing but corneal transplantation. Okay, so get a donor from a healthy cornea, or healthy corneal donor is looked for, and then you transplant it into the diseased cornea in case of keratitis. Okay, so these are the 5 A's you'll have to remember about the medical treatment as well as the surgical treatment. Okay, so that's about the bacterial corneal ulcer. The main important thing in this you have to remember about the investigation, which is the corneal scraping and lacrimal syringing, and then the medical and surgical treatment. Now moving on to the next topic, which is fungal keratitis. So the common pathogens in case of fungal keratitis is Candida albicans, Aspergillus, and Fusarium species. Okay, so these are some of the common pathogens which is responsible for causing fungal keratitis. Now coming to the risk factors and clinical findings. So the risk factors are all those which have been talked about before. But one of the main risk factors is trauma with plants. So whenever there's history of trauma, you should suspect it could be a fungal keratitis and steroid therapy, which I talked about before. So use of topical medication, especially steroids, will lead to keratitis, especially the fungal type, and also will lead to flaring of the infection. So in addition to the above risk factors, these are very important. And another important things in clinical findings are that usually there will be history of trauma. And also same symptoms like in case of bacterial corneal ulcer, so painful red eye, vision decrease, pain, photophobia, watering, all those. But however, there'll be a slow progression of signs and symptoms over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. It will develop slowly, unlike the bacterial corneal ulcer, which develops very rapidly. Okay, so there's a slow progression of signs and symptoms which occurs over 2 to 3 weeks. There's lid swelling, there's circumcorneal congestion, central corneal also with feathery margins, then presence of satellite lesions, and presence of endothelial plaque and hypopyon. So you'll have to remember that the main difference between bacterial and fungal corneal ulcer is that in bacterial corneal ulcer, the ulcer has a well-defined or a sharp margin, whereas in case of fungal, it has a feathery margin, and there are presence of satellite lesions. So in addition to the main lesion, there'll be other small lesions and presence of endothelial plaque and hypopyon. Okay, so here you can see it's a main corneal ulcer with a irregular feathery like margin. Okay, and then presence of hypopyon. Okay, so same here, not that well defined compared to a bacteria, and usually hypopyon is present in case of fungal corneal ulcer more than the bacterial corneal ulcer. So coming to the management, so main, of course, the investigation is corneal scraping. So you start with mainly go for STA and BHI and for Giemsa staining. Okay, and then treatment has to be started right away. So after you send for scraping, treatment has to be sent right away, and then whatever comes in the culture report, you change accordingly. So in case of management or treatment of fungal corneal ulcer, in addition to the above, the atropine, acetazolamide, so antifungals are given. So topical antifungal, usually natamycin, that is given for filamentous fungi. Okay, if it's fusarium, for yeast and aspergillus, amphotericin B is given. And systemic antifungal in the form of ketoconazole, 200 to 600 milligram per day, is given in severe filamentous corneal ulcer, and fluconazole is given for severe yeast keratitis. And mechanical debridement is another important thing in the treatment. So what happens is that whenever you do a mechanical debridement, especially in case of fungal ulcer, that helps in better penetration of the drugs and helps in proper healing or better healing or faster healing. And last option is, of course, like in bacterial keratitis, is therapeutic penetrating keratoplasty. Okay, so in bacterial, in fungal corneal ulcer, you'll have to remember that in addition to the antifungal, topical as well as systemic antifungal drugs, other drugs which we talked about before, like atropine, acetazolamide, analgesics, and vitamin A, all have to be given. Okay, so that's about the management and treatment of fungal corneal ulcer. Now, lastly, about the complications of corneal ulcer. So it will lead to scarring. Okay, so various scarring will be there. Secondary glaucoma, iridocyclitis. Okay, and then whenever it's a huge corneal ulcer, especially in the center of the cornea, that will lead to a impending perforation, and that can lead to a descemetocele, where it is bulging out of the Descemet's membrane, and that will lead to perforation, and lastly the various types of corneal opacities. Okay, so these are the complications of corneal ulcer. Okay, so this is all for today's class. So you'll have to know about the various types of corneal ulcer, and then about the anatomy, physiology, and risk factors which are responsible for this transparency. So all these are important, and also about the bacterial and fungal corneal ulcer.